Harry's Wife, Part 101.75. What really happened? The Rift. We continue the examination of Harry's wife's behaviour with a raft of evidence that comes with the serialisation of Valentine's new book in the Times, which provide us with more evidence from the people that he's spoken to, from the palace insiders, namely the staff, which helps us understand more about events that have taken place, possibly corroborating the information that Tom Bower has accessed, and also letting us know more about the behaviours of Harry's wife. The extract's titled Harry, Harry's Wife, and the Palace Insiders Who Saw What Really Happened. Prince Harry is looking nervous. He is in a hotel in Malawi at the end of the first day of a 3-day visit there as part of his and Harry's wife's 2019 tour of Southern Africa. He's got to tell the Queen that he and Harry's wife are about to detonate a bomb under what has, until then, been a very successful autumn tour. And he's not looking forward to the prospect. In 2 days' time, Harry and Harry's wife will release an explosive announcement that Harry's wife is going to sue the Mail on Sunday, assertion of control and nullification of threat to control, over an article it published revealing the contents of a letter she wrote to her father. Harry will also publish a statement of his own, in which he will condemn the media and accuse the tabloids of waging a ruthless campaign against Harry's wife, distortion of perception as a consequence of her manipulative behaviours and pity plays, vilifying her on an almost daily basis. The media's behaviour, he will say, destroys people and destroys lives. But first, he has to make that phone call. Harry often has an attack of the nerves before he has to speak to the Queen, so when he joined his team for a drink in the bar that Sunday evening, he sat there so strung out and nervous that his private secretary Sam Cohen told him, "You need to have a beer." Looking back on the saga of Harry and Harry's wife's alienation from the royal family, there are several moments when the final rift seemed inevitable. One of those was this tour, when they not only blew up their relations with the media, but ignored the guidance of the people who were supposed to advise them. Sense of entitlement, haughtiness, knowing best. It seems none of the staff accompanying the couple on the tour thought it was a good idea to release that statement, but the Sussexes were determined. Her, as a consequence of her need to assert control and believing that she knows better than anybody else, him, as a consequence of his own narcissistic traits of pride and vanity and defiance coming to the fore as a consequence of her hold over him. They were on their own path, and nothing was going to stop them. Even before Harry's wife came on the scene, Harry's grievances with the media, especially the tabloid press, could lead to tensions with his staff. One insider recalls, he was always messaging, making phone calls, it was non-stop. There were constant battles with the media, and expecting the team to be on your side. He was always on Twitter. You then had to be on everything too. Every minor infraction was a big deal. This sensitivity that Harry has to the social media and the media is something that Harry's wife, of course, is able to exploit to her advantage. Harry's enemies were not just in the media. He definitely had mistrust of the courtiers at Buckingham Palace and his father's palace, said one source. This could lead to tensions within his own team, who were based at Kensington Palace. He would use this phrase the whole time, the palace syndrome, when you won't fight the battles he wants, because you have been institutionalised. Giving in to the media was a key symptom of whether you had developed it. It was a constant test of loyalty. Are you going to protect me, or have you just become one of them, who won't fight for me? It was exhausting. Now note that Harry has this mentality, not as a narcissist, but as a consequence of what he has been exposed to. Harry's wife has a similar mentality, but hers is driven by the need for control and the paranoia that harnesses and exacerbates that need for control, basically saying, are you with me or are you against me? Kate has often played the peacemaker between the two brothers, extension of her emotional empathy, the desire to heal and fix, empathic trait of compassion. Not that William and Harry were at loggerheads. They weren't. But when they both wanted to get involved in the same areas, such as conservation, that could lead to tensions. Harry would also express his frustration at the people working for him, They were holding him back. Some of his advisers spent much of their time talking him down from the various things he wanted to do, because it wouldn't fit into the bigger picture of what the three of them, William, Kate and Harry, were trying to achieve. Notice that there is a degree of harmony between the three. Shared interests. That, of course, has all changed. Why? Somebody else came on the scene and isolated Harry from two people that he once got along with very well. Compounding Harry's frustration was a long-held fear that his time was running out and that once Prince George turned 18, he would become irrelevant. He had this thing that he had a shelf life. He was fixated on this. He would compare himself with his uncle, Prince Andrew. He would say, I have this time to make this impact, because I can. Until George turns 18 was the way he was thinking about it. Then I will be the also-ran. He was generally thinking of it as, I have this platform now for a limited amount of time. I want to move forward. Move forward. Again, this need to utilise the platform and, with, from his perception at least, an expiration date on it, is also again something that could be exploited by Harry's wife. His staff assured him he was a very different person from Prince Andrew. They told him, you can still have an impact in your 40s, 50s, even longer, so long as you set the right foundations now. But he never saw that. Harry's obsession with the media, his sense of frustration, mistrust of palace courtiers, and the constant loyalty tests of his own staff were all there before Harry's wife, but after Harry's wife turned up, it got significantly worse. No sooner was Harry's relationship with Harry's wife made public in October 2016 than the massive invasion Harry had feared began. Faced with hordes of journalists intent on trawling through every aspect of Harry's wife's life, Harry became determined to protect his girlfriend, extension of his emotional empathy. Harry's wife, meanwhile, told him that if he did not do something about it, she would break off the relationship. Use of threat. A source said, she was saying, if you don't put out a statement confirming I'm your girlfriend, I'm going to break up with you. Harry was in a panic. Another source said he was freaking out, saying, she's going to dump me. You can see parts pass him with regard to Harry's wife, part 101.71, threat, you're binned unless, for my more detailed examination of that threat. Harry turned to Jason Knorth, the bright young American who was recruited by Kensington Palace in 2015 to be the communications secretary for the Cambridges and Prince Harry. His previous role had been running the communications for the crisis-hit Royal Bank of Scotland. He loved working for William, Kate, and Harry. Harry phoned Knorth demanding that he put out a statement confirming that Harry's wife was his girlfriend and condemning the racist and sexist undertones of some of the media coverage. Harry's wife wanted public validation, that this was a serious relationship. Assertion of control over Harry, assertion of control over tertiary sources. She was convinced that the palace was unwilling to protect her from media intrusion. She told Harry's staff, I know how the palace works. I know how this is going to play out. You don't care about the girlfriend. Invalidation. Triangulation. This, however, was just the beginning. Keeping Harry's wife happy, and by extension keeping Harry happy, was an ongoing challenge. Harry's staff knew that Harry's wife was different from the other royal girlfriends. She had her own opinions and would let people know what they were. A sense of entitlement, speaking out. In the spring of 2017, more than 6 months before the couple were engaged, she told one of Harry's advisers, I think we both know I'm going to be one of your bosses soon. Assertion of control, haughtiness. There was also a lot riding on Harry's wife. The palace knew it could not afford to repeat the mistakes that were made with Princess Diana. Before the wedding, Harry's wife had a meeting with Miguel Head, William's private secretary, who told her that the palace would do everything they could to help. There was no need to think that she had to take on her new role in a particular way. Harry's wife thanked Head and said she wanted to concentrate on her humanitarian and philanthropic work, facade management, and to support Harry as a member of the royal family, cognitive empathy. As one source said, the entire place, because of everything about her and because of what Harry's previous girlfriends had been through, was bending over backwards to make sure that every option was open. This, of course, contradicts her suggestion that she wasn't helped. Also, sits neatly with Tom Bower's confirmation that a team of 14 were put in place to help her. Sir David Manning, former ambassador to the United States, who was William and Harry's foreign affairs advisor, also put his mind to thinking about how Harry's wife might fit into the royal family and what married life could look like for them. However, the couple's sense of frustration and their suspicion of the palace establishment, paranoia, was already causing problems. An early issue was security. In the immediate period after her arrival in London, there was no straightforward mechanism for providing Harry's wife with full-time police protection, especially at a time when the palace was trying to slim down the level of security provided to members of the royal family. Such matters were decided by a Home Office committee called RAVEC, the Executive Committee for the Protection of Royalty and Public Figures. Harry's private secretary at the time, Ed Lane Fox, a former captain in the Blues and Royals who joined Harry's close-knit team in 2013, argued Harry's wife needed to be protected immediately. Ed had to wage a huge battle to get them to understand that she would not be able to live her life without police protection. Harry's wife had no idea that this was even happening, because we didn't want her to have another reason to think that she wasn't going to be welcomed. Ed did amazing things for her behind the scenes, but none of them was really appreciated. To Harry and Harry's wife, the 2 months that it took to get a decision about her security seemed like an age. They felt as if the powers that be were simply unwilling to provide her with the security she needed. Absence of patience. At this time, at the Queen's request, the Lord Chamberlain, Earl Peel, the most senior figure in the household, went to see the couple to explain to Harry's wife how the palace worked. He recalled, "I liked her, actually. She was very forthright, very, very polite. Facade management, cognitive empathy, very understanding, she wanted to learn." However, relations between Harry's wife and the team at Kensington Palace were fraying fast. In late 2017, after the couple's engagement was announced, a senior aide discreetly raised with the couple the difficulties caused by their treatment of staff, haughtiness, absence of emotional empathy. People needed to be treated well and with some understanding, even when they were not performing to Harry and Harry's wife's standards, they suggested. Harry's wife was said to have replied, "It's not my job to coddle people." Dismissiveness, arrogance, haughty behaviours. Meanwhile, she wasn't dealing with the more junior staff. Even people whom William and Kate and Harry, before Harry's wife came along, had been quite happy to engage with. Superiority, arrogance. It seemed that she wanted respect, and having to talk to someone a bit further down the pecking order in a small office, where there wasn't much of a pecking order, wasn't treating her with respect. She would take it as an insult, believes one source. Grandiosity, threat to control. Organising the wedding was particularly stressful. There were rows about scheduling, the wedding announcements, the gospel choir, and most famously the tiara. In the months before the wedding, Harry's wife was told that the Queen would lend her a tiara for the big day, just as she had done for Kate Middleton 7 years earlier. An appointment was made in February for Harry's wife to look at a short list of appropriate tiaras at Buckingham Palace. Accompanied by Harry, and under the watchful eye of Angela Kelly, the Queen's dresser, who is also curator of the Queen's jewellery, Harry's wife opted for the Queen Mary's diamond bandeau tiara. I will deal with the issue of the tiara in a separate video, as it merits its own separate examination. Around the time of the organising of the tiara, Harry's wife spoke particularly harshly at a meeting to a young female member of the team in front of her colleagues. After Harry's wife had pulled to shreds a plan she had drawn up, haughtiness, malign behaviours, the woman told Harry's wife how hard it would be to implement a new one. "Don't worry," Harry's wife told her. "If there was literally anyone else I could ask to do this, I would be asking them instead of you." Belittlement. Later, Prince William, who had heard some of the treatment that she had been subjected to, came to find the woman. "I hope you're okay," he told her. "You're doing a really good job." She promptly burst into tears. Exhibition of emotional empathy by William. Ed Lane Fox never planned to stay much longer than 5 years working for Harry. A few days after the wedding, Buckingham Palace announced that Samantha Cohen, the Queen's former assistant private secretary, would be stepping in to help the couple out for 6 months as their interim private secretary. Cohen, then aged 49, had already handed in her notice at Buckingham Palace, but just as she was preparing to leave, after 17 years, the Queen, who had a high regard for her, asked her to stay on and help Harry and Harry's wife. Cohen, everyone calls her Sam, was one of the most popular and well-regarded members of the Queen's household. Harry knew her well already, as did William, and was very fond of her. The feeling was reciprocated. Cohen was determined to make her new job work. Harry was initially very enthusiastic, said a source, but Cohen was soon to discover that making Harry and Harry's wife happy was a bigger challenge than she had anticipated. In autumn 2018, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex undertook their first official overseas trip to Australia, Fiji, Tonga and New Zealand. Jason Knorf did not join them because he'd recently broken his collarbone. Knorf had been growing increasingly concerned about how staff were being treated by Harry's wife, and Harry too. The issue had been brought into focus by the departure of Harry's wife's PA, Melissa Tuabati, who just 6 months After joining the palace, Tuapti, who was the second PA to leave after Harry's wife's arrival, was a 39-year-old French woman who had previously worked for Robbie Williams and his wife, Ada Field. After she left, the palace source paid tribute to Tuapti's talents in an agreed statement with Tuapti. A week later, the Sunday Mirror reported how Harry's wife had reduced Tuapti to tears, belittlement, lack of emotional empathy. A source told the paper her job was highly pressurised, and in the end it became too much. She put up with quite a lot. Harry's wife put a lot of demands on her, sense of entitlement, ordering around, expecting perfection, and it ended up with her in tears. Melissa is a total professional and fantastic at her job, but things came to a head, and it was easier for them to both go their separate ways. Since then, palace sources have said that the clashes between Harry's wife and Tuapti centred on the free gifts that some companies would send to Harry's wife. Deliveries were constantly arriving at Kensington Palace. Clothes, jewellery, candles. It was absolutely non-stop, said a source. Tuapti was apparently punctilious in following the household rule that members of the royal family cannot accept freebies from commercial organisations. Her approach did not go down with Harry's wife. Threat to control. Residual benefit. On another occasion, there was confusion over the arrangements for a London engagement by the Duchess. Harry's wife thought that no media would be there, but it was on a press rota. It was the sort of mishap that did not go down well. The member of staff involved knew they would have to talk to Harry's wife about it, and was dreading the prospect. After they missed a call from her, they rang back, but she did not pick up. Assertion of control through silent treatment. They said, "She hasn't called back, I feel terrified." A short time later they said, "This is so ridiculous, I can't stop shaking." As one source said, there were a lot of broken people. Young women were broken by their behaviour. One member of staff, they said, was completely destroyed. Another staffer who had been having a rough time told a colleague they were considering resigning and the couple were outrageous bullies, adding, "I will never trust or like them again, but have made peace with that." The colleague replied, "That's so dreadful, and they are bullies." The harsh treatment was not confined to junior staff. One source said that Samantha Cohen had been bullied. Another said they treated her terribly. Nothing was ever good enough. Sense of entitlement. It was, "She doesn't understand. She's failing." In fact, the source said, Cohen was a saint and the best organiser of royal tours they had known. In February 2021, the Duchess's lawyers denied by proxy, that Cohen had been bullied, saying that the couple were always grateful for her support and dedication. Facade management. She remains very close to the Duke and Duchess. On October the 26th, 2018, just as Harry and Harry's wife were flying from Tonga to Sydney for the Invictus Games, Knauf wrote an email to his immediate boss, Simon Case, Prince William's private secretary, saying that he had spoken to the head of HR for the palace about some very serious problems concerning Harry's wife's behaviour. He wrote, "I am very concerned that the Duchess was able to bully 2 PAs out of the household in the past year. The Duchess seems intent on always having someone in her sights. She is bullying X, name withheld by author, and seeking to undermine her confidence. We have had report after report from people who have witnessed unacceptable behaviour towards X, despite the universal views from her colleagues that she is a leading talent within the household who is delivering first-rate work." This, of course, is damning evidence, demonstrating the bullying behaviours towards a person, but not just one, but many other individuals, and this repetitive behaviour exhibiting bullying, which is a form of manipulation, an absence of emotional empathy, haughty behaviours, a sense of entitlement. Knauf, who was in daily contact with staff on the tour, went on to say that the tour was very challenging and was made worse by the behaviour of the Duchess. He also expressed concerns about his own standing and suggested even Samantha Cohen could be struggling to cope. It can be hard to define exactly when a particular behaviour amounts to bullying. As Jenny Afia, the solicitor who later represented the Duchess in her action against the Mail on Sunday, put it, what bullying actually means is improperly using power repeatedly and deliberately to hurt someone physically or emotionally. The Duchess of Sussex absolutely denies ever doing that. Denial by proxy. Knowing her as I do, I can't believe she would ever do that. It just doesn't match my experience of her at all. There was, however, no doubt that Harry's wife could be a demanding boss. There were a number of people, allegedly including Harry himself, who suggested that the problems were partly to do with cultural differences in management style. Omid Scobie and Karen Durant, authors of Finding Freedom, said, "Americans can be much more direct, and that often doesn't sit well in the much more refined institution of the monarchy." That observation, of course, may well be accurate, but this wasn't about her being American. It's, of course, about her being a narcissist. However, Jason Knauf, the person who made the bullying allegations, was also an American. In Insiders said this was more about just Harry's wife's American straight talking. Meanwhile, Harry and Harry's wife were going down a storm on the tour. Massive crowds were turning out to see them, and Harry's wife's refreshingly informal approach to royal visits was proving a hit with the Australian public. Facade management. Behind the scenes, it was a different story. Although she enjoyed the attention, Harry's wife failed to understand the point of all those walkabouts, shaking hands with countless strangers. According to several members of staff, she was heard to say on one at least occasion, "I can't believe I'm not getting paid for this." See parts passim with regard to understanding more about what that means. One member of the tour, more sympathetic than most to Harry's wife, said, "I think Sam was trying to work out what was this office going to look like after Harry's wife had arrived. Harry's wife wanted to bring in her people rather than turn to the traditional Buckingham Palace people." Assertion of control. "My impression was that it was proving very, very difficult to hold this together. And in the middle of all that, not only are they newly married, but you've got a very big tour to do, and Harry's wife's pregnant, so it's clear there's a lot of pressures." Again, this is somebody who doesn't understand narcissism, which is demonstrating why they declare it as being as a consequence of those pressures. Now, of course, those pressures will impact upon her ability to keep her ignited fury under control in the same way if a narcissist gets tired, they are less likely to be able to keep their ignited fury under control. But the point is, it's not the pressures per se, it's the narcissism that's driving all of this. More than once, staff felt they were being treated harshly. On the journey from Tonga to Sydney, Sam Cohen was said to have had a particularly torrid time of it, according to one source. Sam had been screamed at before the flight and during. After that, she warned other staff to stay away from Harry and Harry's wife for the rest of the day. That evening, her colleagues tried to arrange matters so that she did not have to see Harry and Harry's wife any more than was strictly necessary. The treading on eggshells. "It was horrible to see yesterday," one said the next day. According to one source, David Manning, who was always a reassuring presence on tours, would say, "You are dealing with a very difficult lady." The effect of Harry's wife's behaviour was perhaps seen in its starkest terms sometime after Knauf wrote his email to Simon Case. Harry had heard about the complaint and had tried to persuade Knauf to make it go away, something denied by the Sussex's lawyers. One member of staff who was named by Knauf in the email was due to work with Harry's wife the next day and was worried that she would find out about the complaint. "This is why I feel sick," they said. "I don't want to have to get in the car with her tomorrow morning. She'll blame me for it, which will make tomorrow absolutely horrific." In the months after the South Pacific tour, the relationship between Jason Knauf and Harry's wife was effectively over, even though Knauf was still officially in charge of their media operation. In December, Harry's wife, wearing a black one-shoulder Givenchy dress, made a surprise appearance at the British Fashion Awards at the Royal Albert Hall, where she presented an award to Claire Waite Keller, who had designed her wedding dress. Knauf had no idea what was happening until Harry's wife was on stage. Lack of accountability. She'd refused to let Sam Cohen or her assistant private secretary, Amy Pickerill, tell him it was happening. Assertion of control. Scapegoating. A month after Knauf sent his bullying allegation to Simon Case, he handed in his notice. He was instead taken on by William and Kate as a special advisor, and later became chief executive of the couple's charitable body, the Royal Foundation. The bullying allegations, meanwhile, accelerated a major shake-up at Kensington Palace, with Harry and Harry's wife splitting their household from William and Kate's. The hiring of a new communications secretary for the Sussexes in early 2019 was part of the process. First, however, decisions had to be made about what that household would look like and where it would be based. The palace wanted to set them up with an office within Buckingham Palace. Harry and Harry's wife wanted their own arrangement, probably at Windsor Castle, near their new home of Frogmore Cottage. If they were stuck in Buckingham Palace, subservient to the Ho Palace machine, they would be no better than other lesser royals, such as the Duke of York or the Earl and Countess of Wessex. Sense of entitlement. But there was no way that the palace would fund the establishment of a separate satellite operation. It was a decision by the Queen and the Prince of Wales, both of whom were keenly aware of the need to avoid unnecessary extravagances. The Sussexes did at least get a big team. It included a private secretary, 2 assistant private secretaries, a communications secretary, and 2 other communication officers, as well as administrative staff. Sarah Latham, a dual US-British citizen with a bright smile and seemingly boundless energy was the PR big hitter who was going to be in charge of communications. Then, a managing partner at the Freud's PR agency, she had a wealth of experience, having been a senior advisor on Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. Sarah was very experienced in exactly what they needed, said one source. She was capable of telling truth to power and being honest with them. Meanwhile, Cohen was clearly delighted to be getting out soon. A source once said, Sam always made it clear that it was like working for a couple of teenagers. They were impossible and pushed her to the limit. She was miserable. Cohen was at her wits' end, said a friend. She was exhausted, had stayed on with the Sussexes for longer than she originally planned, and felt isolated from the rest of the royal hierarchy now that she was no longer in the Queen's private office. She was constantly having to battle on Harry and Harry's wife's behalf while taking all this abuse from them. She also found herself getting far more involved in arranging their personal lives than would be normally be appropriate for a private secretary, who, despite the job title, is just there to look after their official lives. Boundary transgression, lack of emotional empathy, sense of entitlement. Her replacement was Fiona McIlwain, who had become one of the youngest British ambassadors in history when she was appointed to Albania in 2000, aged 35. At first, Latham and Harry's wife were a golden combination. Golden period. She told a friend, I love this job, it's amazing. Latham would go round for lunch with the Duchess at Frogmore Cottage to talk things over. Latham thought she understood Harry's wife, who believed that the press hated her, paranoia, painted black, and that she was a victim of racism in the media. The way Latham saw it, Harry's wife as an American was a victim of cultural differences rather than racism. What she needed was someone to hold her hand and help her navigate her way through the minefield. It did not take long for the shine to wear off. There was a series of battles with the media that spring and summer. First came Harry's wife's lavish baby shower in New York. Then, when Archie was due in May, Harry's wife was determined to avoid the indignity of a royal birth with journalists camped outside the hospital. The palace put out a statement saying that the Duchess had gone into labour, only for it to emerge later than she had, in fact, given birth some 8 hours before. In the summer, the couple's taste for private jet travel brought them further criticism. After Harry gave an address about the need to save the environment at Google Camp being held on Sicily, and then flying back on private jet provided by Google with Leonardo DiCaprio, he and Harry's wife took 4 flights on private jets in less than a week to visit Ibiza and the south of France. Hypocrisy, sense of entitlement. This prompted rows with Sarah Latham, who had advised Harry against taking private jets. Relations between the couple and Latham became increasingly tense. Close colleagues began to wonder how long Latham would want to stick around. At the back of their minds was the feeling that anyone leaving the Sussex team would be best advised to think of a good excuse. Harry's wife did not like it if she thought it was about her. Next to go was Harry's wife's assistant private secretary, Amy Pickerill. At the time, sources said the departure described by Harry's wife as very sad, facade management, was amicable. In fact, when Harry's wife learnt that Pickerill had handed in her notice, she was so angry, ignition of fury, that she refused to let Pickerill travel with her in the car to an official engagement in London that morning. Silent treatment. By August 2019, things were awful and tense within the Sussex household. There were also clues that Harry and Harry's wife did not see their long-term future as working members of the royal family. Their Africa tour was coming up, but there was nothing in the diary after that. Meanwhile, staff were increasingly aware of the presence in the background of Harry's wife's business manager, Andrew Mayer, and her lawyer, Rick Gino, as well as her agent, Nick Collins, and Kayleigh Thomas Morgan of Sunshine Sachs. The US team had been very busy, working on deals not only with Netflix, but also a deal for Harry's mental health series for Apple Plus with Oprah Winfrey, and Harry's wife's voiceover for a Disney film about elephants. While preparing for the Africa tour, the team was trying to persuade the couple that it would be appropriate to do an interview with the British media. Sam Cohen suggested Tom Bradby of ITV, who already had a relationship with Harry. Harry's wife was reluctant at first. Her attention was focused on the prospect of doing an interview with Oprah Winfrey. After thinking about it, however, Harry said they would agree. There was one proviso. He and Harry's wife could not do interviews together or be in the same shot. That would go against their deal with Oprah, which at that point was slated for the autumn of that year. It eventually went ahead more than a year later, in March 2021. The first real intimation that the public had that all was not well in Harry's wife's world came in October 2019, when ITV released a trailer for its documentary, Harry and Harry's Wife, An African Journey. As Harry's wife spoke to Tom Bradby in a garden in Johannesburg, she spoke about how she had struggled with life in the spotlight as a newlywed and as a new mother. Almost as if she were trying to hold back tears, she said she had found it hard and added, "And also, thank you for asking, because not many people have asked if I'm okay, but it's a very real thing to be going through behind the scenes. Pity play." The trailer came out while William and Kate were on a tour of Pakistan, overshadowing. The resulting coverage inevitably overshadowed reporting of the last day of the Cambridge's tour. The Cambridge team was not happy and saw it as a deliberate attempt to knock the Cambridges out of the headlines. Relations between the two households became quite tense. When the documentary came out, it also showed how far Harry and William had drifted apart. Asked by Bradby about the rift between him and William, Harry chose not to deny it, but said instead, "We are certainly on different paths at the moment, but I'll always be there for him, as I know he'll always be there for me." William, back home after the Pakistan tour, appears to have been taken aback at such a stark portrayal of his brother and sister-in-law's unhappiness. He realised they were in crisis. The day after the documentary aired, William WhatsApped his brother to ask if he could come and see him. This put Harry and Harry's wife into a spin. What should they do? Initially, Harry was in favour. Then he spoke to his brother again and asked him who he would tell. William explained that we'd have to clear his schedule, which would mean telling his private secretary. At that point, Harry said, "Don't come." He was so concerned that William's team would leak the visit to the press that he would rather they didn't come than risk it getting into the papers. It highlighted once again the dysfunction at the heart of so many royal relationships, and that members of the royal family so rarely pick up the phone and speak to each other directly. Just 5 months later, Harry and Harry's wife would step down as working members of the royal family and move to Canada before finally settling in California. Plenty of evidence there from behind the scenes about the continued behaviours of Harry's wife, exhibiting her sense of entitlement, ordering people around, expecting perfection, having no accountability for her behaviours, lacking emotional empathy, being manipulative, being haughty and dismissive, and also the way that she would play upon Harry's vulnerabilities and cause his own narcissistic traits, which are strong, to come to the fore with his treatment of them also. All solid evidence that continues to paint a picture. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.